If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, why the Conservative Party's problem is that they're not Conservative anymore. As Joe Biden says he wants to return for another 4 years in the White House, is he dreaming? We'll get the views of the Queen of US showbiz royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. In the big question with declining birth rates, is not having children selfish? We'll debate that with Andrea Williams from Christian Concern and a lady called Veronica, who has chosen to be childless. Is the country ready for Boris 2.0? Has he got one hand on the trophy already? I'll put that to Boris-backing Tory MP Carl McCartney, who joins me at 9:45. Plus my all-star panel, and at 10:30, the Sunday papers live and interrupted. And there's only one show in town. It's the race for number 10. So lots to get through. I'll see you after the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Yes, there is only one show in town tonight, and it's all focusing around politics. Rishi Sunak's supporters have this evening thrown doubt on the claim by Boris Johnson's allies that he has reached the 100 backers needed to become the next Tory party leader. Sources close to the former Prime Minister told GB News earlier today that Mr Johnson, who's yet to declare, had passed the threshold required to get onto the leadership ballot. Publicly, though, Boris Johnson has 74 supporters. However, Sunak supporters point out that those 74 who have publicly declared their support for Johnson dwarf the 133 publicly declaring for Rishi Sunak. Yesterday, Penny Mordaunt became the first to announce her campaign to replace Liz Truss. Boris Johnson's father, Stanley, also spoke to GB News, and he said his son has unfinished business and will definitely enter the race.
I think he will put his name forward, and I think he will beat Rishi Sunak in a head-to-head. And I want to say, because I'm now going to reveal this for the first time, when I get my vote, my electronic password, I will be voting for Boris, because I think he will do the things I care about: Europe, environment, peace in our time, and net zero.
Meanwhile, the former Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab has told GB News today he thinks Rishi Sunak is the best person for the job.
I think he is, both on economic but also on those critical issues of public trust, the best place to get the government and fundamentally the country moving forward. The trust that the public have in the leader matters, and that's why I think Rishi is best placed to deliver in the national interest.
Well, in other news today, a planned bus strike by hundreds of workers was stopped following a new pay offer. Around 600 members of the Unite union at Arriva in Kent were set to walk out for 5 days from Monday. If the new pay offer is rejected, the strike action scheduled for Friday the 28th of October will go ahead. International news, and Iran has condemned a UN probe into allegations its country's drones are being used for Russia to attack Ukraine. France, Germany and Britain called for the United Nations to investigate the Kremlin's use of the alleged Iranian-made drones. It follows claims from US intelligence that Iranian military trainers were in Crimea, helping Russian forces operate drones to attack targets in Ukraine. And lastly, a yellow weather warning is in place for most of England and parts of Wales for this weekend. Brace yourselves for thunder, heavy rain and flooding. The thunderstorm warning is going to last between 4 a.m. tomorrow morning until 5 a.m. Monday morning. Forecasters are warning the wet weather could lead to flooding, leaving businesses and homes at risk of damage. Transport could also be affected, with possible road closures and train cancellations. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Mark Dolan Tonight.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, in just one moment, why the Conservative Party's problem is that they're not Conservative anymore. Another car crash interview with the leader of the free world, President Biden, as he literally falls asleep at the wheel in a major interview. Take a listen as he nods off halfway through that chat.
I have not made that formal decision, but it's my intention to run again. And we have time to make that decision.
Dr. Biden is for it. Mr. President. Oh.
Dr. Biden thinks that, my wife thinks that I...
Do stay awake. The president says he wants another 4 years. He wants another 4 years. Is he dreaming? We'll get the views of the brilliant showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield live from Hollywood, California. In the big question with declining birth rates, is not having children selfish? We'll debate that with Andrea Williams from Christian Concern and a lady called Veronica who has chosen to be childless. Also, is the country ready for Boris 2.0? Has he got one hand on the trophy already? I'll put that to Boris-backing Tory MP Carl McCartney at 9:45. Plus, at 10:30, the Sunday papers live and uninterrupted. And there's only one show in town. It's the race for number 10. Meanwhile, in the news agenda with my panel, should big companies stay out of politics? And as a top academic says you can't call your children naughty, are parents being censored? Reacting to those stories and many more are my brilliant panel tonight of best-selling author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, broadcaster and comedian, the one, the only, Tommy Sandu. And last but not least, coming in hot tonight, the UK director of the newly formed Common Sense Society, political commentator and broadcaster, Emma Webb. Now I want to hear from you throughout the show. My email is mark@gbnews.uk. The best bit of my show is when you get in touch. And this programme has a golden rule. Do you know what that golden rule is? We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So there you go. For the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. The most revealing tweets are the ones which are swiftly deleted. If you can't stand by a thought that you've shared with the world, it normally means you have unwittingly revealed what you actually think and are suddenly fearful of the repercussions. Which brings me to Tobias Ellwood MP and his now deleted tweets endorsing Rishi Sunak as our next Prime Minister. However, Ellwood, in doing so, made quite a bold statement and one which is revealing. Take a look. He tweeted, "The free market experiment is over." He says it's been a low point in our party's great history. The reset begins. That's right, the reset begins. He goes on, time for a centrist, stable, fiscally responsible government offering credible domestic and international leadership. So there you have it. The mask has slipped along with the halo. What does the reset begins actually mean? Welcome to hell. Now, Tobias Ellwood is a gentleman, and he's been on this show many times, and I hope he will be again in the future. A highly regarded MP among his constituents in Bournemouth East, and he's been heroic as chairman of the House of Commons Defence Select Committee, calling out the deep and chilling threats both China and Russia pose to British and Western interests. True leadership and wisdom from the big man. But with this tweet, he has revealed what has become all too obvious, which is that the party of Thatcher and her incredible economic revolution, which saw the liberation of working class people, allowing them to buy their own council houses and flats, start businesses and think big for themselves and their families, is no more. That's right, Thatcher is nothing more now than a distant memory. Her legacy within the Tory party, gone. It's been replaced by a centre-ground, almost Blairite political and economic philosophy. New Labour Light, which condemns us to years more of tax and spend, big state, big debt, low productivity and anaemic growth. And the cruel irony is that the party which delivered Brexit is now so woefully poor at delivering the opportunities it offers. And if you want evidence that the Tory party, which has been heading leftwards economically and politically since David Cameron, is falling out of love with capitalism, look no further than the outgoing Prime Minister Liz Truss's bold attempts to reinvent Britain as a low-tax, high-growth economy and a global hub for investment. Yes, that mini-budget went down horrifically in the international financial markets, but it was Tory backbenchers too who have been decoupled from Margaret Thatcher's vision of economic freedom. And that ultimately did for Liz Truss. Many MPs said they would not vote for the top-rate tax cut, which was designed to attract wealthy people to live here, invest here and pay their taxes here. In fact, of late, Tory backbenchers have clamoured for an increase in corporation tax on businesses just as we enter a downturn. Doesn't sound very conservative to me. And an inflation-busting pay rise for those on benefits, a pay rise double that of those in work. I thought it was Tory policy that working should always pay. Now, don't get me wrong, the pandemic response would have been worse under Labour, but there was nothing conservative about COVID measures over the last 2.5 years. Vaccine and mask tyranny. Whatever happened to the power of the individual? And what about the Beijing-inspired policy of lockdowns? Destroying our great cities, controlling people's movements, closing once viable businesses, and paying perfectly healthy people to stay at home. That's not conservatism, that's communism, all on the watch of a Tory Prime Minister. The brilliant entrepreneur and political commentator Ben Habib got it just right in a tweet earlier this week. He said people have been very quick to ditch Liz Truss, but her policies were spot on. They were the policies she promised to deliver, and she was true to her word. The market reaction should have been calmed by the Bank of England, but it hung her out to dry, as did the Tory wets. Yes, the mini-budget was disastrously executed, but the vision was right, and with Liz Truss's departure, any hope for change is now gone. And the current soap opera around who next leads the Tory party is academic. A bigger ideological question facing Tory MPs and Conservative grassroots supporters is not Rishi or Boris, it's left or right. Whoever becomes the next Prime Minister has one last opportunity to lead a Conservative party which is actually conservative. If they vacate that territory which has made them the most successful democratic force in European history, based upon the principles of economic and personal freedom, then they will be gone forever. With individuals like my friends Nigel Farage, Richard Tice and Neil Hamilton happily filling the gap. The Conservatives, the so-called natural party of government, risk becoming the natural party of opposition. Is the Conservative Party still conservative? Let me know your views. Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll get to your emails shortly, but let's get reaction now from my panel, broadcaster and comedian Tommy Sandhu, best-selling author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, and political commentator and the UK director of the newly founded Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. Emma, let me start with you. Are the Conservatives still conservative?
Well, I think the Conservatives haven't been conservative for a very long time. I think Liz Truss attempted to put forward what was a very solid political philosophy, a free market political philosophy that has become associated with conservatism, obviously isn't conservatism in its entirety. But I think for many Conservatives, both within the party and outside of the party, the Conservative Party haven't represented Conservative values, as I said, for a very, very long time. And the point has been made over the last couple of days about what the future of Conservatism is in the United Kingdom, given the chaos that the party is currently in. And actually, my point would be that whether we have this government or whether we have Conservatives in opposition, regardless, those who hold really, truly conservative values are still not in government and have not been in government for the last 15 years.
Tommy Sandhu, what do you think about the future of the Conservative Party? Because I just wonder whether if they vacate the territory that they've occupied successfully for a long, long time, they've dominated politics in this country for a whole century, that they'll be replaced by someone else, and it could be Nigel Farage.
Could be. Who knows? Look, we all said during lockdown that, oh, these are unprecedented, crazy times. Who would have thought lockdown? Who would have thought everything that's happened politically in the last few months, few weeks, would have happened as well? So the world's going crazy. I think we can all accept that. But what's the future like? Clearly, confidence is what underlies a lot of the politicians and their success. So there wasn't any confidence in Liz's plan. There's no confidence now in the Tory party. There's no confidence in Boris after everything he's done, and will he come back? So we need confidence. So we need that message to be sent out, which feels to me actually a little bit superficial. Like, it's not actually based on anything. It's just sending out the right message to the rest of the world that we are a country that's got ourselves together, that we've got direction, that we've got purpose, that we've got a plan. So for that reason, I'm hoping that someone with Rishi's background could come in and instill that confidence. I think if a Boris return happens, I don't know what that does for confidence on a global scale.
It's an interesting point. Laura Dodsworth, what did you make of that tweet? This is a Conservative politician, and I've mentioned that I like Tobias Ellwood. He's a decent man, but he said that this experiment with free markets or, market capitalism, the free market experiment is over. It's been a low point in our party's great history. Free market capitalism is what the Tory party is supposed to be all about.
It's jaw-dropping, which is why he's deleted it. I think that was a really duff move to delete it, because that's not how it works. You know, it's been screen-capped. It will live forever. The experiment with free markets. Well, what's the opposite of a free market? It's a command and control market. What's the opposite of capitalism? It's socialism. Who is Tobias Ellwood? I mean, you say he's a gentleman, but is he a Conservative? It doesn't sound like it at all. And, you know, back in 2020, he also tweeted about the New World Order. And I'm sorry, but no British MP has any business tweeting about a New World Order. We're not a world order. We're a nation. We have a national government. We don't have an international government. I think it's really strange. And I think the tweet highlights quite painfully what sort of schism we've got in the Conservative Party. Echoing you and also Emma and Ben Habib, I think that Liz Truss's mini budget was quite reasonable. There was nothing that was very ideologically wayward or immodest about it. What went wrong was the way that it was communicated and delivered. And in terms of confidence, which Tommy mentioned, actually, people could have been confident in it. What happened was the Bank of England decided not to show confidence in it, and I don't think she was given a fair crack of the whip. Conservative Party members voted for Liz Truss, and now we've apparently got a choice between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, who the Conservative Party members didn't vote for. I just want to say I feel really despondent about politics, I have to say right now. I think we're in a staggering, depressing, despondency-inducing phase of British political life. It's quite incredible. I think the nation's probably a laughing stock, but I'm not laughing. It's too depressing.
Are you despondent because actually there's no answer to this? Because Labour's not the answer, a new Prime Minister is not the answer, that this country has lost its way? Laura?
Yeah, I think that in a way the Conservative Party is a metaphor for the nation. The Conservative Party's lost its way, doesn't know what its values is, like Emma was saying. I think that's because as a nation we don't know what our values are. You can't just pluck them from thin air. I think there is a sense that we're a bit lost. I don't really want a general election because I don't feel confident in the Labour Party, but I don't want a Conservative Party either. I would have to spoil my ballot if there was a vote tomorrow, and this is such a depressing state to be in.
Emma Webb, to take the side of Tobias Ellwood for a moment. Perhaps this tweet has been taken out of context and misunderstood, which is why he's deleted it. And that for clarification, when he says this experiment with free markets is over, he means a sort of libertarian economic model, cutting taxes when the country's got a massive deficit. That it was the rather kamikaze mini budget he was referring to, not capitalism.
I think his tweet is still astonishing, and even if you try to read it in the most favourable possible interpretation, it's still astonishing. And what he really represented there, if you do take the fairest interpretation, is this position that seems to be what is afoot here, which is that this sort of pull towards, and having panicked about any attempts to actually have a principled political, philosophical approach to the economy and to governance, to pull back from that in panic and to instead anchor ourselves to this sort of centrist, Remainer, globalist position, which I think the country has also had enough of. And I think Laura's right. I think I too share that feeling of despondency because, yes, we do need stability, but what we don't need is more of the same uncreative drudgery, because that isn't going to get us out of this crisis. It's not going to get us out of the economic crisis. It's not going to help us to escape stagflation, which is what Liz Truss was attempting to do with this mini budget. And I think that is giving not just Brits, but also in terms of, as Sonny was saying, our international, how we project ourselves internationally. It creates the impression, really, that the situation is extremely futile and that we are spinning with no sense of purpose or direction or values. And I think that's extremely concerning, and I think it's bad for democracy. So I think even if you do interpret Tobias Ellwood's tweet in a generous way, I think the fact that he deleted it says everything, really, with friends like these who needs enemies.
Also, Tommy, I'm going to come back to you in a second, Tommy, but Laura Dodsworth, you were nodding your head there. This is a Conservative government that hasn't done much to push back on extreme political correctness or so-called wokeism, has it? I think even Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, struggled to define what a woman was. In fact, the woke takeover of our institutions has happened on the watch of the Conservatives, as well as the net zero eco agenda. Again, none of these things very Conservative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just like to say that although you can put a positive spin on Tobias Ellwood's tweet if you really, really try, I think he hasn't just shown his colours, he might have shown Rishi Sunak's colours, who he's supporting. I think that's a big worry.
What do you mean by that? What does that particular tweet tell us about Rishi Sunak's potential premiership?
What he's saying about the experiment with free markets being over, that's not encouraging. If he feels allied to Rishi Sunak's vision, I find that really concerning. And, at the moment, our current tax plans deal a kick in the knees to businesses. It is an anti-growth mini budget. If a business has more than £50,000 net profit, then their corporation tax is going up to 25%. It's the last thing the economy needs. And it's a slap in the face to small business owners, their employees, and the price we're going to pay for goods and services in the near future. So I think it's a disgrace.
Although, Tommy Sandu, a Labour government is hardly going to be more pro-free markets than any Tory administration. So be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I can't believe we're even debating it. I mean, only a little while ago, I sat here, we feel like only weeks ago, talking about Keir Starmer and what he offers, and we kind of laughed at that. And now it's a serious consideration that someone like him and the Labour Party could be running the country. We've also got so many U-turns. The people have made U-turns, because it's not just politicians. We've all U-turned on our own morals, and we're trying to go, well, back to Boris, or he's back to this, or he's back to that. I think we've all just sort of lost our way. The compass of life has gone, and we need our needle back. Mark, bring the needle back.
Yes, well, I'll do what I can. Listen, we've got a very, very busy hour to come. I think you'll agree we're travelling business class with my panel tonight. They'll be back later in the hour. In the news agenda with my panel, we'll be joined by Boris-backing Tory MP Carl McCartney. He's live at 9:45. He's backing Boris, but is the country ready for Boris 2.0? Can a blonde leopard change its spots? Plus, we'll have the Sunday papers live and uninterrupted with full panel reaction at 10:30 sharp. But next in the big question, with global childbirth rates dropping, is it selfish not having children? See you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
What's the best bit of my show? When you get in touch, Mark at gbnews.uk, hundreds of emails pouring in. Where shall we start? Matt says, Mark, great show as always. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for the kind words. Matt says, I think we need an election now. I'm not even really bothered by who wins. The policies would probably be broadly similar and market-driven anyway. But we just need some new blood and some new ideas right across the board. Alan says, as a working-class Conservative of an age who served the country both in the military and after 55 years of work, my self-esteem and upstanding would never change my political standing. You get out of life what you put into it, not dependent on others. My vote will never change because I am true to myself. Alan, thank you for that, and I salute you for your service to this country in the military and also 55 years of hard graft. Good on you, sir. How about this from Andrew? Hello, Mark. I think the best thing that can happen is a general election. Let Labour in and watch them fail at trying to solve all of the current issues. Conservatives can then regroup, ready for the next term in office. Under who, do you think, Andrew? I would suggest Kemi Badenoch in a few years' time. Tobias Elwood says, Derek seems to have lost his way. Rishi sounded like Tony Blair when he spoke at the hustings. Even his mannerisms seemed to ape Blair. No, he does not have my vote. Ronald says, since David Cameron was in coalition with Nick Clegg, it was perfectly clear it was Blairism Mark II. Even worse is that even today they're all World Economic Forum puppets. And the sheep who support Keir Starmer et al., guess what? WEF puppets, and all Blairites is, of course, they are a globalist puppet as well. That's from Ronald. And for now, last but not least, nothing about the Tories since the days of Cameron is conservative. Wokery has come to dominate our institutions on their watch, says Keith. Keep those emails coming, Mark at gbnews.uk. It's time now for this. Now, the very talented and popular BBC breakfast show presenter Naga Munchetti has given an interview with the Radio Times in which she reveals she was demonised for her decision not to have children. During a radio discussion, one contributor told her she was wicked, and in particular wicked against her mother for denying her grandchildren. Well, as Western countries see a worrying drop in birth rates, with big implications for the economy and the functioning of society, are those who can have children but don't selfish? In a fascinating article by The Telegraph's Rosa Silverman titled "Child Free by Choice, the Birth Rate Crisis Gripping the West," she reveals that next month the global population is expected to reach 8 billion. The UN predicts it could grow to about 8.5 billion by 2030, before peaking at 10.4 billion in the 2080s. After that, and some predict it will happen 20 years earlier, the world's population will start to fall. So, is it our civic, societal and economic duty to reproduce? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome Andrea Williams, a good friend of mine, the CEO of Christian Concern, and a warm welcome, live from the United States, to Veronica, co-founder of the Child Free Connection and creator of the ultimate guide to embracing a child-free life. Veronica, welcome to GB News.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And no small kids around to disturb this Zoom call.
No, not at all. My puppy's somewhere, so he might want to jump in, but
You've got a puppy, that's even more work. Now, obviously, I fully respect your decision, Veronica, not to have children. What was behind that decision? Why are you child-free, if that's not too personal a question?
No, not at all. I am child-free for many reasons. Initially, my idea was that I, of course, was going to have children because that is just what you do. And the more I thought about it, I realized that I didn't really have the desire to be a mother. So my childhood journey was really long because although I didn't want to choose the path of motherhood, I had so much ambivalence because people kept telling me that I was making the wrong decision, that I was going to regret it, that I was being selfish, that it was essentially the biggest mistake of my life. So I had to do a lot of self-evaluation and self-work to come up with the right answer.
Have you been criticised for not having children, or have you had those annoying questions about when you're going to have babies?
Oh, so much, so much. I would say most of my late 20s and all through the 30s. I'm 46 now, and I still get it because now women are having children later. The maintenance person in my building just told me the other day that his daughter had a child at 50, so that I still had time. So yeah, I get it all the time.
And how does it make you feel?
Well, it used to make me feel terrible. It used to make me feel like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have this desire that all women have? Why am I not craving this need to procreate? So it was very confusing. And I also felt less than because people just kept telling me how wrong I was. And people kept telling me that, again, it was the biggest mistake I was going to make in my life. So it was terrifying. It was terrifying to make a decision that is definitely the biggest decision that a person can make according to the trajectory of their lives, and everyone around you telling you that you're doing the wrong thing.
Yes. What motivated you to form the Child Free Connection?
Well, the motivation was because I realized that I initially thought that because so much time had happened between my personal experience and now, I thought that we were at a point where it was more accepted. And I realized during the pandemic, when I read an article talking about how in the workplace, child-free people were expected to pick up the slack, that it wasn't. And by the way, it's not that I don't expect people to help others. You should help people in need if you're able to, but it was more about the expectation that child-free people are doing nothing else, have no other responsibilities, and that they should be picking up the slack. So that initiated my research, and then I just went into a giant hole, and I realized that people need the support, they need the guidance, they need the facts, they need the research, and they need to be celebrated for their choice.
And how has your partner felt about your decision? Because I guess one of the dilemmas for a woman that doesn't want to have a child is how the husband or boyfriend feels, because they may not always be on the same page when it comes to the desire to reproduce.
Yeah, that absolutely can happen. I met my partner now when I was almost 40. So at that point, I was very grounded and confident and solid in my decision. And he actually was as well. So we personally didn't have to have that debate of, are we going to, are we not, because one of us does and the other one doesn't.
Could he have convinced you to have babies if he was persuasive?
Absolutely not. No.
Andrea Williams, welcome back to the show. What's your reaction to what you've heard from Veronica?
Well, let me say this, that in my 20s, I was starting out as a young barrister and very content, and was married at 25. And I wondered, I didn't know at that point whether or not we would be able to have children. I wasn't yearning for a child. And then my firstborn came along and I simply couldn't get over her. It was the most extraordinary, beautiful thing imaginable. I felt like no one had ever given birth before. And this is the beauty of children. This is the blessing that they are. And I've gone on to have 3 more, and they are wonderful and beautiful blessings. And I think this is something that it's natural, it's beautiful, it's the most wonderful way. It's the most wonderful way to live if you are blessed and you are gifted with having these children. And so I think that first of all, we need to celebrate the joy that children bring us, and also recognise that was, in a sense, that this is something that actually makes society go round. This is what family is, and we should begin to celebrate that a little bit more. In your previous section, Tommy was talking about the compass of life is gone. It's as if we've lost our marbles as a nation, and there's a sense in which we mustn't over-individualise everything. Family is actually about self-sacrifice. It's self-sacrifice with husband to wife, self-sacrifice in what you do there, but also then the joy of having children within that relationship and within that construct.
Would you say, and I know you're a very spiritual person, would you say it's your spiritual duty to have children? Do you think it's the will of God to have babies?
Well, I think what I'd say is I'd actually ask another question. I'd frame it a little bit differently, that question. There's a sense in which if we think back to the 1960s when the pill came in, it was at that point that sex became something in a sense that was almost viewed as more recreational, when in fact the fundamental purpose of there's a sense in which it's not just recreational but procreational, and there's a sense in which we want to deny that as a society, because we so individualize this all of this, as if there is no consequence to commitment and no consequence to the acts that we do. And I think that we need to realize that having children is a natural product of commitment to one another, and the beauty of sexual expression between a man and a woman when they are committed to one another. And I think it's when we lose all sense of moral compass generally in society, when we reduce sex to being something that's very individualistic or recreational, then some of these issues, I'm not talking about necessarily big choices, but I'm just talking some of the issues around these subjects begin to be debated.
Veronica, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, first let me backtrack to something that you said earlier, because this really baffles me. I feel so strongly that whenever I speak about my child-free choice, or anybody speaks about it, parents tend to think that we are saying that they are doing something wrong, or that we're against it, or that we don't understand their joy. So when they speak about their joy, their fulfillment, their everything, that the children are bringing them so much happiness, we understand that and we respect that. But I want to say that is for you, that is the joy that the kids bring for you. It's
But I
not
didn't
for everybody.
expect
It's
it.
such
That
an
was the
individual
surprise.
choice
That was the
that you can't
surprise.
put everybody in the same box. And people, it's such a personal choice that people need to make their own decisions. And it also baffles me that people who have children and physically, mentally, spiritually, verbally abuse them are revered for having them over someone who's child-free. We have thousands of people in our community in the Child Free Connection who serve their community. They're educators, they're nurses, they're doctors. They take care of their elderly parents. They take care of their sick siblings. They take care of their siblings' kids. It's the reason that they have so much responsibility already that they're not taking any on, because they are just giving and giving and giving. And the only way to give is not through being a parent. There are so many other ways to do it.
Andrea?
The truth, of course, it's wonderful to give in many ways, but actually a family unit, a commitment between a man and woman within marriage, the natural consequence of that is to have children. And that is something that is out, and it's not that people then within a family are unable to give more broadly. It's something more broadly to the community and more generally. Very often there's a sense in which capacity can almost grow.
Andrea, doesn't
family...
I've got no doubt, Andrea, that you're a brilliant mum, but doesn't that sentiment that families, that a relationship is there to produce children, doesn't that guilt trip somebody like Veronica? And isn't it good on her for not having children if she doesn't want them? Because there's nothing worse than having a child in the world who is not wanted.
Well, let me say I'm in a sense making no judgment around in terms of how Veronica chooses to live her life. She is free to choose to live her life in this way. But I'm simply making the case for the beauty of children and the way in which naturally that is the most wonderful foundational building block
sorry
for
to interrupt you,
society.
Andrea, but aren't there already too many unwanted children in the world? Don't we need more parents sitting down and having a think, actually, do we want this responsibility? Are we up to the challenge?
And I'd say then there are many people in this world who are unable to have children and would love to be able to look after those children that perhaps are unwanted. There's a sense in which we can, when we are altruistic, when we actually seek the good of our community, when we seek the good of our community through solid marriages, solid families, and serving into the community, then a lot of those things can actually be worked through and worked out.
Well, there's an idea.
I just want to be clear on the word family, because you've been using that word.
We've over-individualized the whole of life.
Okay, Veronica.
Okay, so you keep referring to the word family, but I just want to be clear that the word family, by your definition, is a traditional family where there's a mother, a father, and children. But people are now finding their own families that do not include children, and they consider themselves a family. I consider me, my partner, and my dog a family. People consider themselves a family when they're just in a group of home with friends that really care and love one another. Some people do not consider their blood relatives family because they have been very abusive and caused them a lot of trauma. So your definition of family is extremely traditional, and I respect that that is your view, but the idea of family has changed over the years.
Well, look, a fascinating...
But where there is a mum and a dad, and a marriage commitment, a lifelong marriage commitment, and children flow from that, and then generation to generation, you see the love and the commitment amongst that family, then you see human beings flourish. And of course, I, as a Christian, would say that's because that's the way God intended for it to be, and that actually the whole something about mutual giving from which children flow, and then we look after one another within a family unit, and from that comes the flourishing for those individuals, Veronica, security for those individuals.
Closing thoughts, Veronica.
This is a very romanticized version of family. It's extremely romanticized to assume that the whole family is going to take care of each other, that the children are going to thrive and be members of society that are loving and that are helping and that are caring and have the right values. And yes, it happens, but it also doesn't. There's a lot of bad things happening in the world right now. And those are children that were born into this world. And also, not to mention the fact that there are plenty of people, and you can just Google it, that regret having children. And because they were not able to make the decision for themselves, perhaps they were pressured, perhaps they just did it to give their parents, grandkids, whatever perhaps their partner really wanted them to do it. These are all not reasons to have children. And now here we are, like you mentioned, with all these unwanted children in the world. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. It just really doesn't.
It's a fascinating conversation. I wish we had longer, but my deep thanks to both of you. Andrea Williams, the CEO of Christian Concern, and Veronica, co-founder of the Child Free Connection and creator of the ultimate guide to embracing a child-free life. What's your view? Is not having children, if you can, selfish? Mark at gbnews.uk. We've been asking that same question on Twitter, and 89% of you say it's not selfish to not have children. 11% say it is selfish if you can have kids but don't. Coming up, Joe Biden wants to return for another 4 years in the White House. Who's he kidding? We'll get the views of the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. We've got the Sunday papers at 10:30, uninterrupted, with full panel reaction. But next, is the country ready for Boris 2.0? Live down the line, Boris backing Tory MP Carl McCartney. He's next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness, man.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
All of your emails are so considered. I do love getting them, Mark at gbnews.uk. If you can have kids but don't have kids, is that selfish? Jane says, having children is up to the individual. I decided not to have children in my teens, says Jane. I've never missed out not having them. In fact, I find them quite annoying. I don't care what people think of me. It was my choice. I've had a great life. My late husband, who died several years ago, had 4 children. Not one of them visited him before he died. Jane, thank you for sharing your very personal story. I'll get to more of your emails in just a moment. But we know that the political and economic experiment that was Liz Truss's premiership has now come to an end, and the Tory party are looking for a new leader once again. It's looking potentially like a two-horse race between former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, with both reportedly securing the 100 MP backers they need. But is the country ready for Boris 2.0? Let's speak now to Lincoln MP Carl McCartney, who is backing Boris all the way. Good evening, Carl.
Good evening, Mark, and good evening to Laura, Emma, and also to Tommy and all your audience.
Well, thank you. Great to have you on the programme. I believe it's your first appearance, first of many, I've got no doubt. Mr McCartney, why Boris Johnson and not Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt?
Because I think Boris Johnson proved himself before the 2019 general election as Prime Minister. He led the party into that general election as a Prime Minister and secured the best result for the Conservative Party for many a year, with a huge majority of members of Parliament as well. And we've still got just over 2 years of that 5-year parliamentary term, and we live in a parliamentary democracy. And it's up to the Conservative Party to choose the best leader for the Conservative Party. And I personally believe, as do many of my colleagues, and actually so many of my constituents in Lincoln, firmly believe that that person is Boris.
Is Boris Johnson, do you think, to the prized figure of 100 Tory MPs? We're hearing noises from Boris supporters that he's hit the century, but what do you know?
I'm very confident that that Boris Johnson has hit that 100, and actually is over the 100. So I think there's various, should we call them commentators, and maybe some of Rishi's supporters who are trying to denigrate that information. But the fact is, we will see on Monday, won't we, by 2:00, because the nomination papers have to be in, and the nomination papers need to have 100 or 100 plus Conservative members of Parliament's names on there with their accompanying qualifications. So I'm quite confident, as I'm told the Boris Johnson campaign is, that he's over that threshold and actually seeking to have even more of his fellow Conservative members of Parliament sign his nomination papers and put him forward to be the leader of our party.
Do you anticipate that he will officially declare his participation in this contest tomorrow?
I don't know, because I've not actually spoken to him personally, so I'm sure he's discussing that with some of his close lieutenants, but we will wait and see and find out, won't we? So it'll be either then or Monday, obviously, once the nomination papers are in and he's confirmed as a candidate. It's a very fast-paced and will be very fast-moving from there on in, because once the nomination papers are and the close of nominations is at 2:00 on Monday, the hustings is at 2:30, and then I think the voting starts at 3 or 3:30. So it's all going to be quite fast-moving on Monday afternoon.
However, Mr McCartney, do you think that if Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister, that his appearance before the Privileges Committee into whether he misled Parliament or lied to Parliament could derail his premiership just weeks into his return to number 10?
No, I think there's all sorts of things that got thrown at Boris Johnson as Prime Minister by the Labour Party and some in the mainstream media. They did it for, getting on for 9 months. They were hoping that some mud would stick. And eventually any individual, once you take a battering, eventually perhaps you think, actually, it's not going to stop. And so you take a decision that you need to remove yourself from the fray and perhaps get away and lick your wounds and do some healing. And that was a decision that he made and he took. But I think there was the phrase buyer's remorse has been used quite a lot. And I think some of those amongst my colleagues who were instrumental in putting the pressure on him to do that immediately saw the error of their ways. And actually, I've spent the summer in my constituency, as I would as a marginal seat member of Parliament, where so many of my constituents, whether they are in business, whether I'm filling up my car at the petrol station, shopping at various different supermarkets, and exactly the same today. Wherever I went today, people were crossing the street to tell me, bring back Boris. I've never had anybody come and tell me that they're really pleased that some of my colleagues, perhaps on the wetter side of the Conservative Party, were right to have got rid of Boris. And actually, nobody's come up to me to tell me that they want Rishi Sunak to be the leader of our party. However, whoever wins, we as a Conservative Party, whichever side of the Conservative Party, and we are a broad church, You've obviously earlier on been discussing a tweet now subsequently deleted by my colleague Tobias Elwood. We are a broad church, always have been, but we all need to row in and get back in line and show some discipline as we move forward for the sake of the country in the immediate future. But obviously, as we progress towards the next general election, which could be, as late as December 24. But that's something that we as a Conservative Party and Conservative members of Parliament need to get a grip of.
It's my guess, Carl McCartney, my instinct, my judgment, having, read this at length in terms of what may pan out next week, that, and I think most political commentators take the view that if it goes to the membership, if it's Sunak versus Johnson, then your man is home and hosed. So it's all about receiving the support of 100 MPs. And I think it's just a matter of time before he becomes Prime Minister. If Boris does get the top job, Carl McCartney, how do you solve a problem like Rishi Sunak?
Well, I don't think it's a problem. I think, as I said, I hope that Boris Johnson's going to win this leadership contest and come back and be our Prime Minister. But if it's Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt, who seem to be the three names that most people are talking about on Monday, and it can only be three candidates that get through to the final because the bar's been 22 exec of 100 Conservative MPs having to nominate a candidate. I think whoever wins, they need to have the most talented people in government. And unfortunately, it's always been perceived politics as, it can be a bit of a chumocracy. And actually, sometimes, we'd all like it to be a meritocracy. That's perhaps a utopia that we won't ever achieve. But actually, at this point in time, with where the country is and where, the international stage is, I think it's desperate that actually the right people, round pegs are in round holes, and actually the most talented amongst us are brought into the tent, so to speak. And, there's 360 or 350 odd MPs that can, Conservative members of Parliament, that can help and want to serve, and I would hope every single one of them would want, if asked by whoever leads our party after the leadership election next week, to do their very best for the country and for the party to ensure, as we move forward to the next general election, we're in the best place to fare well when that election is called.
Carl McCartney, you're saying all the right things. I thought you were about to break in.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I'll give you a fiver later.
Definitely. Look, I think you're absolutely right that the party must unite and move on, whoever becomes Prime Minister. That's only possible if Rishi Sunak enters the tent, if he comes into that broad church of Boris Johnson's premiership. It's very important, isn't it? Last night on the programme, I suggested in my Big Opinion monologue a possible dream team of Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak working together in the national interest. That would unite the party. It would be reassuring to the international bond market and possibly could help the Tories win the next general election. Boris Johnson's got to give a job to Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak has got to say yes. And if that doesn't happen, your party remains horribly split.
Well, we could all, the hypotheticals. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's talking to who. You haven't mentioned other names there. You could say that Penny Mordaunt has performed very well in the various roles that she's had. She wouldn't be being talked about and wouldn't have put her name forward and have a number of my colleagues who've already said that they're going to nominate her if she wasn't a good politician. Good at the roles that she's done, and I gratefully, I'm grateful that she's there. She's somebody that I respect. I've seen her operating, whether that's at the dispatch box or in her department or amongst colleagues, and I very often have breakfast along with a number of others at 7:30 in the members' tea room with her. So I know Penny very well, but I'd hope that she would be in the mix as well as lots of other of my colleagues, some of those who perhaps have been in cabinet, some of those perhaps who have only been junior ministers in the past, or perhaps haven't yet served in a government role. But I would just want the best people to be brought in and to make sure that this country gets on, or we as a government get on with governing the country to the best of our abilities, because that's what the people want. That's why my constituents, the vast majority of them, and those right across the country of my colleagues, are saying bring back Boris.
Carl McCartney, thank you so much. Upon that, we can all agree. Thank you so much for your time. Do join us again soon. Lots more to come in the next hour. But what do you think? Is the country ready for Boris Johnson 2.0? Still to come in the news agenda, Joe Biden wants another 4 years. And next, my take at 10. I'm calling out woke madness. See you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Minute past 10, and this is Mark Dolan tonight. In the news agenda with my panel, should big companies stay out of politics? And as a top academic says you can't call your children naughty, are parents being censored? Meanwhile, Joe Biden says he wants to run for another 4 years. Is he dreaming? Plus, another car crash interview with the leader of the free world. We'll get reaction from the queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Plus, the Sunday papers exactly 10:30. And after this, my take at 10. You'll never get me putting pronouns in an email. This woke tyranny must end. More on that shortly. But first, the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Thank you, Mark. He, him, shall we say. The news this hour. Rishi Sunak's supporters have thrown doubt on the claim by Boris Johnson's allies that he has reached the 100 backers needed to become the next Tory party leader. Sources close to the former Prime Minister told GB News that Mr Johnson, who's yet to declare, has now passed the threshold required to get onto the leadership ballot. However, Sunak's supporters point out there are only 74 who've publicly declared their support for Johnson. That comes after Rishi Sunak, who now has 133 publicly declared supporters, took the lead in the campaign race. Well, yesterday, Penny Mordaunt became the first to announce her campaign to replace Liz Truss. Boris Johnson's father, Stanley, spoke to GB News earlier today, and he said his son has unfinished business and will enter the race.
I think he will put his name forward, and I think he will beat Rishi Sunak in a head-to-head. And I want to say, because I'm now going to reveal this for the first time, when I get my vote, my electronic password, I will be voting for Boris, because I think he will do the things I care about: Europe, environment, peace in our time, and net zero.
Stanley Johnson. Well, the former Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab told GB News he thinks Rishi Sunak is the best person for the job.
I think he is, both on economic but also on those critical issues of public trust, the best place to get the government and fundamentally the country moving forward. The trust that the public have in the leader matters, and that's why I think Rishi is best placed to deliver in the national interest.
Away from politics, a planned bus strike by hundreds of workers has been stopped following a new pay offer. Around 600 members of the Unite union at Arriva in Kent were set to walk out for 5 days from Monday. If the new pay offer is rejected, the strike action will go ahead on the 28th of October. Iran has condemned a UN probe into allegations its country's drones are being used for Russia to attack Ukraine. France, Germany and Britain called for the United Nations to investigate the alleged use by the Kremlin of Iranian-made drones. It follows claims from US intelligence that Iranian military trainers were in Crimea helping Russian forces operate drones to attack Ukraine. And here, a yellow weather warning is in place for most of England and parts of Wales for this weekend. Brace yourselves for thunder, heavy rain and potential flooding. The thunderstorm warning will last from 1 a.m. tomorrow morning until 5 a.m. on Monday. Forecasters are warning the wet weather could lead to flooding, leaving businesses and homes at risk of damage. Transport could be affected and there will be possible road closures and even train cancellations. Great weekend ahead. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Let's get back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Big stories, big guests and always big opinions. In my take at 10, you'll never get me putting my pronouns in an email. This woke tyranny must end. More on that in just a moment, and I'm not pulling my punches. In the news agenda with my panel, should big companies stay out of politics? And as a top academic says you can't call your children naughty, are parents being censored? Meanwhile, Joe Biden says he wants to run for another 4 years. Is he dreaming? Plus, another car crash interview with the leader of the free world on the way. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. I do hope she'll stay awake. Plus, the Sunday papers at exactly 10:30 sharp, live and uninterrupted, with full panel reaction. But first, my take at 10. A top boss in America, a billionaire no less, has been chucked out of his own company for saying there's no place in a work environment for people announcing their pronouns. The Times newspaper report that Ben Chestnut, founder of the tech giant Mailchimp, wrote in an email to staff, it's completely unnecessary for a woman who's clearly a woman to tell us that her pronouns are she, her, and a man who's clearly a man to tell us that his pronouns are he, him. Well, a month after he sent the email, which has been leaked to the Platformer website, he stepped down from his post. How predictable. Just to give you an idea of how bonkers all of this is, here's a truly dystopian example of woke office politics, courtesy of another tech giant, Microsoft.
Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Gadilla. I'm a Caucasian woman with long blonde hair, and I go by she, her. I'm a product marketing lead here at Microsoft and co-host of the podcast Security Unlocked with this guy.
Yes, that would be me. Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Fillingham. I'm a Caucasian man with glasses and a beard. I go by he, him, and I'm a security evangelist here at Microsoft.
Welcome to hell. Or how about this howler from the Deputy US President, Kamala Harris?
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit.
Where do you start? The Scottish Government got in hot water last year for ordering civil servants to put their pronouns into emails. And of course, there was quite the furore when Halifax announced that they would have pronouns on name badges for those who wanted them. Now, Halifax pointed out that this was a voluntary measure. But how many Halifax employees are willing to feel the wrath of woke warriors by choosing not to sign up to the scripture of extreme political correctness? All of this would be amusing if it wasn't so sinister. But there are several problems with people feeling pressured to announce their pronouns. Firstly, 99 times out of 100, it's bleeding obvious what your gender is, as pointed out by that boss who's now out of a job. But it's worse than that, because pressurising people to say what their gender is in an email or at a meeting or when dealing with the public is compelled speech, which last time I checked was a profoundly illiberal idea. You're making people say stuff. And it ties in with extreme gender ideology, which challenges the fundamental scientific fact that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, something this twisted and dangerous ideology is attempting to erase. If you're announcing your pronouns, you're selling a lie, one which ultimately feeds through into real life for everyone. Young women feeling uncomfortable and threatened in unisex changing rooms as men stomp around, opening the curtains and invading their privacy. Don't forget this poor young woman reduced to tears after a traumatic experience at a Primark.
Yeah, I was trying on some clothes and it was a unisex changing room, which I'm really for, and I love that because, you know, it makes everyone feel included. But twice, two men opened the curtain, walked in on me. Apparently it's not the first time it's happened, and security are watching back the tapes and seeing if they can find who it is. But yeah, I just want to say to people, please be careful, and if you go in the changing room, try not go on your own. I will never be doing that again.
Luckily, thanks to the backlash from places like GBNews, where we hold this madness to account, the policy at Primark has been reversed. Back to the billionaire tech boss chucked out of his own company. In that email, he wrote, in the long run, this approach of announcing your pronouns at meetings does more harm than good. Forcing people to behave a certain way is the opposite of inclusion. He said that in conversations with transgender staff, they don't want this type of accommodation. He went on to write, I'm finding that people are no longer motivated by meaningful work. They're motivated to make political statements. They're using company time and company resources to win a game against their opponents, in a game that is raging in their minds and on social media. Coercing people into proclaiming their pronouns is not about creating an inclusive, creative, productive work environment. It's becoming a political statement. Boom. Announcing your pronouns feeds into a narrative around young people, and if they're depressed, if life is not going their way, then they're in the wrong body and therefore should have puberty blockers, chemicals to stop them maturing into an adult. Or maybe they need to have chest-flattening devices to stop them growing breasts. That's progress, is it? Announcing your pronouns encourages scenarios in which young people are potentially brainwashed into having organs removed, causing irreversible damage and life-changing injuries from which there is no return. That's progress, is it? Announcing your pronouns paves the way for this. A biological man called Demi Minor, who identifies as female, entering a female prison in America earlier this year and impregnating 2 female inmates. That's progress, is it? Demi Minor, by the way, nothing minor about her manhood. What about the male paedophiles in this country? What about Sally Ann Dixon, who committed her crimes as John Dixon, again entering a female prison but being moved out of her wing after starting a relationship with a vulnerable inmate with learning disabilities? That's progress, is it? Sally Ann Dixon is a man who sexually assaulted children. It is a slander on the female race to call male paedophiles women. It's disgusting. This progressive land grab of our language, bullying people into announcing their pronouns, is the worst example of woke tyranny, and we must push back against it. It seems harmless or even polite, but it opens the door to something far darker. I'm the most pro-trans person you will find, with friends who have been on that important journey. If you were Robert but prefer to be Rebecca now, good luck to you. But we cannot deny science, we cannot deny women's hard-won rights, and we cannot deny common sense. I won't yield to pressure to announce my pronouns, and I suggest you don't either. He, him, or she, her can do one. Demi Minor, who knew? Let's get the reaction of my all-star panel. Delighted to have with me in the studio broadcaster and comedian Tommy Sandu, best-selling author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, and political commentator and the UK director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. Laura, let me start with you. I thought that email from this billionaire tech boss was very perceptive, very wise, and I agreed with every word.
And I'm really glad you mentioned compelled speech as well, because we're often told that we should respect pronouns out of kindness or out of courtesy, but there's definitely a compulsion. And if you don't respect them, then there can be social, professional or legal consequences. And we have to be really clear about what compelled speech. It means enforcement, it means submission, it means submitting to something you don't necessarily believe in. And this is where courtesy and respect should run both ways. Now, if you didn't want to use somebody's preferred pronouns because you don't believe that, because you believe there are two sexes, then that should be respected. Something quite shocking happened earlier this year, actually. The BBC changed a rape victim's quotes, that's her actual words, to avoid misgendering her transgender attacker. So where she used he, the BBC changed that to they. Now, what sort of respect, courtesy and kindness was shown to the victim? I'd say none. You know, if you don't want to respect pronouns, it doesn't mean you're necessarily projecting hate or animus. It just means you want to show what you believe. You know, those are your own beliefs. It seems kind of crazy that in this day and age we're saying that you'd want to use pronouns which reflect sex because you believe in two sexes. But this is where we are.
Tommy Sandu, there is a flip side to this, which is trans people are among the most poorly treated and victimised in our society. And if people are announcing their pronouns, they feel more comfortable, safer and more included.
Well, not according to what the boss of that company said. Look, I've been, you know, I don't have...
Maybe he's a TERF. He's probably a bigot.
Well, perhaps, but I've read the email.
He's a transphobe.
I've read the email that he wrote. And actually, a lot of what he wrote in the email was really about sort of saving time. He said, look, we don't all... If you are a man that typically looks like a man or a woman that typically looks like a woman, as we have known it for hundreds, if not thousands of years, then we don't need to spend all that time announcing who you are. So he was kind of saying... But the email goes on that he wrote to say, this is an inclusive place and we want everyone to feel welcome. And it was genuine. He was saying this is not about making anybody else feel excluded. And what you quoted there, that he said that this is not how trans people want to be treated. They don't want... That doesn't make them now feel a part of the organisation if everyone is declaring their pronouns. But... As you know, I'm here to quote Shakespeare wherever I can. What is in a name? What is this? We're getting caught up on the superficial rubbish of life. All of this is just noise. It doesn't do anything for anyone. And if we get caught up on the titles, or if we get caught up on the gestures, then what are we really doing? If anything, you just want people to feel like they can be themselves, be accepted in society. And I once there was a woman I worked with called Nikki. I called her Nick. She went, oh, I'm not a Nick. I'm a Nikki. I went, OK. And that was the end of it.
And that was the end of it. Well, look, no one could misgender you, Tommy, given that you're such...
There's no danger of that.
You are the alpha male. I think you're about 110% masculine, let me tell you that.
111 on a good day.
There you go, exactly. Take it up to that. Emma Webb, there are those on the other side of the argument who disagree with this tech billionaire, who would say that the way that you fix transphobia is to have pronouns so that those who choose to identify differently are respected under the law and also just a common courtesy.
Yeah, that's the argument, is that, as you said, you know, this is... They sell this as being inclusive. They say that it's to make people feel more comfortable because if everybody is sharing their pronouns, then it's less odd or peculiar for people who are gender non-conforming to share their pronouns as well. But I think actually, going back to what Laura was saying, it's quite clear that something else is afoot here. You know, this is not just about being inclusive. There have been people who would describe themselves as being gender non-conforming or trans who have made the point that actually compelled speech also forces people to really essentially come out and make decisions about what pronouns they want used for them, particularly young, vulnerable and possibly confused young people, which can set them off down a particular journey, as you mentioned, Mark. So going back to what Laura was saying, I think Laura is absolutely right. And actually there is something more sinister going on here. This is not just about being inclusive. If you look at those that footage there of Kamala Harris or of those Microsoft employees, this is about deconstruction. This is about making the idea, for example, that I am a cis woman, which I find very offensive. I'm just a woman, and I think there are many women who feel the same way. And so, actually, I think, as I say, this is about deconstruction. This is about undermining the norms and actually the common sense within society. It's about undermining people's perceptions for political motives. And going back to the particular statement in this email from this tech boss, I think his point is that on company time, this is not what employees should be doing. They shouldn't be trying to forward these political agendas in conflict with their employees on issues that are as contentious as this. And actually, I think the point that he was making was very sensible and very fair.
Absolutely right. My panel will return at 10:30 with the Sunday papers, live and uninterrupted. 10:30, no adverts right through to 11. So tomorrow's papers, and it's Sunday papers, and it's all about the race for number 10. But next, Joe Biden wants another 4 years in the White House. Who's he kidding? Is he dreaming? Plus, another car crash TV interview with the leader of the free world. He quite literally falls asleep halfway through. We'll have a look at that in 2 minutes' time with the Queen of US showbiz and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The papers live and uninterrupted at exactly 10:30 with my panel. It's the Sunday papers, and of course there's only one story in town, the race for number 10. But it's time now for US News with the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Hi, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. A busy week for you, news-wise, huh?
Absolutely. How is that news of the defenestration of Liz Truss going down and the prospect of Boris Johnson back in number 10?
Bring back Boris. No, I think that it's making us kind of look at ourselves. Do we hold our politicians as accountable as the UK does? Quite honestly, you and I are about to look at an interview with Joe Biden. We know the answer to that is no, we don't. The media in the UK, and I think people in the UK are much more aware of their politicians and they hold them accountable. And I think the United States can learn a lesson from that. Additionally, I think it's another great point for the monarchy because your head of state continues to be King Charles III, and there is some stability in that. And so if something similar were to happen in the United States, we wouldn't have that stability. And I think that those are, some kind of points that we're going over here.
However, I am salivating at one thought, Kinsey, which is that Boris Johnson returns to number 10. He wins the next election. Donald Trump goes back to the White House. We reinvigorate the special relationship and we get that trade deal everyone's been waiting for.
Listen, there's only one special relationship that matters, Mark, and that's you and I, okay? But I had the exact same thought. I said, if Boris comes back, all eyes are going to be on Donald Trump. So we think very similarly.
We do indeed, which is why I love having you on the show. You're like a very beautiful mirror image. The reality is a little less friendly. Can we talk about Meghan Markle? She's very beautiful too. And back in the day, she felt like, well, I don't know, she was exploited for her looks.
That's right. This is in her podcast Archetypes, where she discusses, she seems to discuss stereotypes, which is not the definition of archetypes. So I don't know if somebody's going to step in and let her know. But she talked about feeling like a bimbo on the game show Deal or No Deal. She appeared, I believe, on up to 30-something episodes of the show and said that she left because she felt objectified. And that's why she quit that job. She made a really good amount of money doing it. She met Donald Trump. She became friends with Ivanka Trump. Like it opened up a lot of doors for her and created a lot of opportunities for her. Tom Bauer goes into her old blog posts in his book Revenge. I'm sorry, Mark, but it's almost like she does these things just for headlines, just for attention. But previously, she's spoken about what you have to do in the industry, acknowledging it, talking about how she loves it, that elevation, doing certain things for attention and for marketing. This is one of those instances. She's not that stupid. You can't say that you left a job because you felt objectified and then go book the new Beverly Hills 90210 and be girl giving fellatio in car. I mean, like, that doesn't make sense. You're either going to be objectified or you're not. She didn't turn around and go play a nun on TV. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's another example of a celebrity taking the gig, making a lot of money from it, and then complaining afterwards. A bit like the ridiculous creator of Friends who apologised for the fact that it was so white. Get over yourself. What about Joe Biden, the leader of the free world, the president of the United States? He's known as Sleepy Joe. Well, he lived up to his nickname, didn't he, this week?
Yes, talking to MSNBC, the reporter asks him point blank, you looking about, thinking about running? He says, yeah, I am thinking about it. But then he says, what about your wife? And Mark, I think his brain checks out for a second. Like, you know how you used to have to hit the modem to restart your computer? I feel like we hit the modem right there. I don't know if you have the clip, but it is a second.
We do. I will ask you, if you're watching or listening on DAB+, take a listen to this. And he literally just goes on to standby mode halfway through his answer. Take a look at this.
I have not made that formal decision, but it's my intention. My intention to run again. And we have time to make that decision.
Dr. Biden is for it. Mr. President. Oh.
Dr. Biden thinks that, my wife thinks that we're doing something very important.
It would be funny if he didn't have access to the nuclear codes. It would be funny if Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine, that there was a global energy crisis, that there was raging inflation. It would be funny if America wasn't a politically and socially divided country. This is scary stuff, isn't it, Kinsey?
We have this conversation constantly, and that's why I applaud your country for holding your politicians accountable, for having these conversations, and for, I sympathize for Liz, but she said, I can't do the job I promised that I would do for you, so I'm going to step aside. I applaud her for that. Our politicians are so stubborn, and it's about control. It's about power. And a lot of times it's about financial gain in the background that we don't even know about. And I do think that in this particular situation, 2024 is going to be pretty scary for the Democratic Party.
He's got no chance of another 4 years, has he?
Yeah, good luck. I mean, he's 174. I think the guy needs a nap. Like, let him go to Cabo.
Sorry, Kinsey, I just nodded off. There you go. I should have had a coffee before I went on air. The queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Do check out her brilliant royal website, To Die For Daily. Next up, live and uninterrupted with no ad breaks from 10:30 till 11 o'clock, it is The Papers. See you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Apparently we've got more ads coming. Good. I think we're getting there. I'll tell you about it. Oh, there you go. Welcome to GB News, chatting with my panel because they are so compelling. Look, thank you very much for your emails. I'll get to your emails very, very shortly, but it's just gone 10:30 and it means that we've got tomorrow's papers hot off the press. And, of course, it's the Sunday papers. So let's start with the Telegraph. And the Sunday Telegraph lead with Sunak and Johnson urged to strike deal. Fears of historic Tory split if leadership frontrunners cannot agree a joint ticket. Well, that was the main theme of my big opinion monologue last night at 9 o'clock, and it seems to be resonating through many of today's front pages. This party cannot unite, I don't think, unless the 2 men can achieve some kind of agreement. Quango set up to save money, now bloated with bureaucrats. Another surprising story there on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Sunday Express next. Boris is back. Johnson claims to have 100 supporters for incredible second tilt at PM. But first, he must see off frontrunner Sunak, who remains the favourite for number 10. The Sun newspaper, Sun on Sunday now. New race for number 10. Over 100 MPs back Bojo. But Sunak bags the big beasts. Boris and Rishi secret summit. Deal or no deal is the headline. with a photograph of Rishi Sunak leaving his house in that characteristic crisp white shirt of his, and Boris Johnson tireless in front of a Union Jack flag on the phone, doubtless persuading MPs to join his cause. Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, writes Kate Ferguson, were tonight locked in talks to see if they can strike a deal to crown one of them as PM. The high-stakes summit came after Boris flew back to the UK and claimed he had the backing of 100 Tory MPs, enough to get into the final ballot. As talks went down to the wire, Priti Patel said the ex-PM, Boris Johnson, is the man to lead Britain, but Rishi was boosted by support from Tory big beasts, including Kemi Badenoch. Of course, worth pointing out that Lord Frost has thrown his weight behind Rishi Sunak, as well as Ben Wallace. Sunday Mirror next. Keir slams PM battle fiasco. The Tories can't even govern themselves. The Tories hit a new low, writes Nigel Nelson, political editor of the Sunday Mirror, a good friend of this programme, as Boris Johnson was accused of lying in the undignified race for number 10. Boris is accused of making up the 100 votes he's got from Tory MPs. A Johnson win will spook the markets, say the Sunday Mirror. The Independent next, Johnson told to prove he has support to fight on. Supporters of Rishi Sunak have warned of a constitutional crisis if Boris Johnson is elected by Tory members in the face of opposition from party MPs. The former PM may find himself faced with a boycott of his government by MPs along the lines of the mass resignation that forced his departure in July. Let's hope that history does not repeat itself. I've got Sunday Mail here, the brilliant Scottish paper. Phony. Boris claims he's got 100 backers to be PM, but Sunak says, prove it. The Sunday People, schools crippled by cost of chaos. Teachers pull out light bulbs to cut bills as government implodes. 9 out of 10 schools will run out of money within a year. The Observer next. Top Tories say Johnson return would risk the party's death. Also, 90% of our schools will run out of cash. There's that same story in The Observer that we just heard about in The People. And last but not least, the Daily Star Sunday. AC/DC star spooked. It's only rock and ghoul. I saw the ghost of World War I soldier. Rock legend Brian Johnson says he was once spooked by the ghost of a dead World War I soldier and legged it. Was he on the highway to hell? There you go. Spooky stuff, and those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from my brilliant panel of Emma Webb, Tommy Sandu and Laura Dodsworth, the dream team. And that's what this government are hoping to achieve, Tommy Sandu, when they get their new Prime Minister on Friday. If it's Boris Johnson, I don't think it's going to work without the support and the presence of Rishi Sunak. I think they've got to do it together. What do you think?
The hashtag is already written, Bo-Rishi. Bo-Rishi could work. It works on a marketing level.
Bo-Rishi.
Bo-Rishi. Put that down. Write that down, Mark. Well done. Thank you for making note there. But this
Borishi.
But Borishi. Is it Borishi?
Borishi.
Borishi sounds a bit a little bit Russian, no? I don't know. I don't think you can do that one. But look, what was your question?
Well, I think, in my view, the party can only achieve unity if Boris Johnson is Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak is by his side in the cabinet. If Rishi Sunak's on the backbenches, it's game over.
The problem we've got, though, right now, Rishi doesn't even believe he's got the 100 backers.
Boris, yeah.
Yeah, so there's already division. So how can there be this unity that we're talking about when they're kind of going, yeah, are you really in the race, mate? Have you really got the, can you play at this table? You haven't got the chips.
Well, Laura, is this a game of double bluff from Boris Johnson? Is he pretending he's got 100 MPs because Rishi's people are saying, show me the money?
Oh, yeah, totally. This is all about herd psychology. Well, I say totally, as though I have complete confidence to see into his heart and his mind. I don't. But, yeah, this sounds like it's about building conformity. Come with me, I've got the numbers. And that's how people work. I think there's something quite interesting about the psychology of this, in that we're seeing these league tables go up almost in real time about which MPs have backed who. So, you just know that Penny Mordaunt won't stand a chance now because the numbers are too small. So who's going to pin their colours to her mast. But I just think this is some kind of hideous Groundhog Day. I thought we'd got rid of Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, and now they're coming back together. What were the last few months about? I think sacking Boris Johnson over cake's looking increasingly silly. I know I'm being flippant. It wasn't really just cake. But the thing is, the point I'm dying to shoehorn in, Mark, is that I don't think he should have left because he broke the rules. I think he should have left because he never imposed the rules. And Rishi Sunak, in this fantastic expose interview with The Spectator, said he thought the lockdowns went on too long. He was always against the closure of schools. He specifically talked about Project Fear, you know, too much fear being conveyed upon the public to make them follow the rules.
Which he could see was impacting the economy.
Yes, but why didn't he say it earlier?
Well, can I just defend Sunak? I realise he's not wildly popular in these, in these parts, but the reason why I actually called for him to become Prime Minister in January of this year was an exclusive from the Mail on Sunday newspaper at the end of January, in which it was revealed that a holy triumvirate of Lord Frost, Rishi Sunak and Jacob Rees-Mogg confronted the Prime Minister last Christmas and said, you cannot have another lockdown. And it was Rishi Sunak that saved Christmas. It was just tangible proof that really Sunak was anti-lockdown. Who was the man that spearheaded and ran his leadership election campaign, Sunak's campaign? It was Mark Harper, who, of course, was the unofficial leader of the COVID recovery group of lockdown sceptic Tory MPs.
Right.
So if you're looking for the lesser of two evils in relation to COVID and COVID tyranny, all roads lead to Sunak.
I don't know, though, because, you know, while he was Chancellor, we've spent... what is it?
$500 billion about.
$500 billion on quantitative easing and furlough. You know, furlough went past its sell-by date
By the way, that figure,
after 3 weeks.
This is 500 million is not nonsense because, you know, a billion, it's billion, isn't it?
Yeah.
500 billion. That's academic because, in fact, when you factor in lost economic output, the cost of the NHS backlog and attainment in schools as a result of school closures, you're looking at $1 trillion, really. This was the $1 trillion war.
The war on a virus which could never be won.
Not great, not a good look.
No.
Emma, what do we think about this? I understand Laura's point, but the world is not perfect. I think the worst scenario is an election anytime soon. And therefore, we need a government of national unity. And for me, it features Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. Possibly Rishi as Prime Minister or Boris as Prime Minister, one of the others, Home Secretary, Chancellor. But they've got to work together, I think, in order to unite the party.
It may be the only possible outcome and the only way to avoid a general election. And I think, actually, of all of the possible scenarios, it's no win, no win, no win, no win. Because and going back to what Laura was saying, I don't think that either Rishi or Boris are particularly economically sensible. I know they might like to brand themselves as being the economically responsible option, but I think if you actually look at what happened and the spending under their premiership, this is Groundhog Day. We don't really want to return to this. And actually, if this is not going to be going to the Conservative Party membership, the Conservative Party membership didn't want Rishi. So if the Conservative Parliamentary Party vote him in to be leader, they voted for Boris. They didn't vote him out. He resigned. They voted for Liz. Liz has then resigned. And now that they would end up with Rishi, I think that is an undemocratic scenario. And for Boris then to return, particularly when Boris is in this current situation where he's about to be, they're about to decide whether or not he misled Parliament.
That's right, face the Privileges Committee.
That could lead to a really serious crisis. And so I think we could end up with a situation where we have possibly Prime Minister Rishi and Chancellor Boris. And I don't think that this is an ideal situation under any circumstances, but it may be the best outcome that we can possibly hope for.
But then we're hearing so much about how those disenchanted red wall voters, many of whom watch my programme, many of whom watch GB News, who will only vote Conservative again if they get Boris back. They feel like their Prime Minister was taken away from them. He remains stubbornly popular and he remains an election-winning machine. The Tories, I would suggest, have to do a deal with the devil now and accept Boris and Rishi Sunak in a government of national unity.
I think in order to win those marginal seats, what really matters is actually that Boris if there is still some belief in Boris, and he is still the person who I remember during the 2019 election, I was true blue. I was teary when Bishop Auckland went blue. And I was told that when Boris walked into pubs in the north, people were banging tables because they were so enamoured with his leadership. So if it is the case that there is still a lot of hope placed in Boris in those marginal former Red Wall constituencies, and if there is still some confidence in him from the Blue Wall in the Shires, then I think ultimately what has to happen is that Boris actually has to deliver. It's not enough for him to just have the optics. He actually has to do the Conservative thing. And I think the problem at the moment is that, as we were discussing earlier, there are very few true Conservatives in positions of influence currently within the Conservative Party. They are suffering a crisis of identity. It's a deep spiritual crisis and political crisis that goes to the absolute root of the entire system, including on the other side of the House. And I think that this is a really profound crisis that isn't, we can talk about the ins and outs of the politics of it, but this is a real crisis that I think is going to have a very long tail on it for a long time, and that's going to stretch long beyond the next general election.
Tommy Sandu, you've been in and out of a few jobs in your life.
Oh, mate, yeah. So I want to just touch on that note. Don't go back to your ex. Never go back to your ex. It never works out. You think, because I think what's happening now is we're going back with the ex because we think I don't want to be single at Christmas. We're all going to be sitting together.
I need a date for New Year's.
Oh, right, exactly, right. And
We'd
you're
just be
going to
grateful to have Christmas.
Well, obviously, it'd be great to have something. We're getting great to have some loving from Boris. No, we don't need the loving. And I think that there's a danger here that we're quickly forgetting because we're looking back through rose-tinted glasses and we're looking at his charisma.
7 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. They go, the charisma. It's the charisma's going to carry us through now. Forget the charisma. Like you said, it's not about the optics. It's about who can deliver now. And we're realising, if anything, in the last few weeks, that economic stability is what's leading people and this country and our confidence and our role in the world. And it was nice to hear Kinsey actually say, we're still looking to the Brits for that moral guidance, for that kind of, look at your MPs stepping down when need be. That we are known for being a morally kind of guided place. We are driven by our principles.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know that we've still got that, but we're in danger of losing it. And I think we can't go back to someone who has been known for lying. We can't go back to someone who has been caught, who is currently still under investigation, which we don't know how that's going to play out. This could be so terrible for the country if he gets back in and then the Privileges Committee find what they could find.
This is not a drill, Laura Dodsworth. I think Boris Johnson, if he's got 100 MPs, is on his way back to number 10 because in a face-off against Rishi Sunak with the membership, Boris wins. So, the key figure is whether he can hit that century. Some people think he's bluffing, but you're a great psychologist. Your book about COVID measures is sort of suffused with insight about the psychology of control and all the rest of it. Let's talk about Boris Johnson's psychology. Will he have learnt from his mistakes? Could this be Boris Johnson 2.0? Could he come back bigger, better, stronger, blonder?
Well, caveat, I'm not a psychologist, although the book did touch on psychology, but...
You understand human behaviour, and you've certainly shown great insight into how people can be manipulated.
It's been a field of interest for a good few years. I think that yes, of course, he could have changed while he's been out in the world.
He's not stupid, is he?
On holiday. But you know what? He's still married to the same person, and Rishi Sunak's got the same daughters. They're both very guided by people around them and the whole blob in all the kind of eco activism. I wouldn't actually rule out a climate lockdown in all but name under Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. So, we're talking about what they've done before and COVID and furlough.
But, I mean, you wouldn't get that under Keir Starmer? You wouldn't get that under any number of people. Penny Mordaunt the same. She's written glowingly about Bill Gates in her book.
I quite agree. And to be honest, I feel quite neutral about whoever gets in because I don't like any of them. I felt much more... Yeah,
is there anyone in the Tory party that isn't a
Truss.
terrifying globalist? I guess it would have been Liz Truss.
I think it would have been Liz Truss. The mistake she made was U-turning. She didn't have the backbone to stick it out longer and having the right people and publicity around the very reasonable manifesto she was delivering on. I don't know. I think that the rot goes so deep, and was talking about almost like a spiritual crisis. They're so uncertain of their ideology. They don't have a certain political ideology that, to be honest, it doesn't really matter.
However, are we not underestimating Boris Johnson? He famously, Emma Webb, got Brexit done. He won that election. He showed great leadership in relation to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He's a hero in Ukraine. And he's a quick learner. I mean, he's had a few years in power. He's had a small break now, topped up his bank account, topped up his tan. And I just wonder whether he can come back to number 10, a more enlightened person, a more reflective leader, keen not to make the mistakes of the past. So, you know, we're hearing noises from his camp that there won't be a culture of partying at number 10 and that his cabinet will be a cabinet of all the talents. So are you buying Boris 2.0? Improved?
I think that
Boris
is all far too optimistic for me not to have an allergic reaction to it, especially after what's happened over the last couple of years. I've sort of learned that optimism is probably not the way to go. Look, I think that Boris is a great politician. I think he's actually one of the highest calibre politicians that we have. So don't get me wrong, but I do think that we need cometh the man, cometh the hour, and this is not the hour for Boris Johnson. Charles Moore made exactly the same point in the Telegraph
as did Lord
today.
Frost.
Exactly, and I think this is not the time for Boris Johnson. I think that the combination of Boris and Rishi would be in the long term, very, very bad for the Conservative Party. And whatever those people in those marginal seats may think of Boris Johnson, I think that actually the combination of the two will lead the Conservative Party in a direction that is very, very far from the true conservative values that people are desperate to see in their leaders at the moment. And the problem is, and again, in the Telegraph today, Camilla Tominey made this point, that there is no right-wing candidate. There is no true Conservative candidate in this race. You just said it yourself, you know, Penny Mordaunt. They're all the same as each other, and none of them represent what the people really want. And that's the reason why we see all of these smaller parties coming together and trying to figure out if coalitions can be formed. But I think that ultimately that isn't going to be successful. And so we're in a what I think is starting to look like a death spiral. And I think that it is a very, very serious turning point in our politics. And I'm actually very concerned about it.
Well, look, let's stay on politics, but this time corporate politics, another story floating around the papers. Ryanair have entered the political fray by posting a boarding pass for the Prime Minister, Liz Truss. And they went further by posting a tweet banning Boris Johnson from their airline. But should big business stick to running their companies and leave the politics to the grown-ups? There's Liz Truss's Ryanair boarding pass, destination anywhere. Have we got the Boris one as well? There you go. Let us be clear. We're not helping Boris get home today.
They don't fly from the Caribbean anyway.
Well,
so I don't think they could.
I can't imagine flying back from the Caribbean on Ryanair.
He flew economy, though, you know that, right?
Good for him, man of the people.
Yeah, he kept it real in economy with his family.
Well, he can't afford a private jet. He's skint, isn't he?
There's economy and then there's Ryanair.
I mean, Emma, I just don't know whether this is helpful. Listen, I am Mr. Free Speech, so if Ryanair want to do jokes about the PM, good luck to them. But I just think that it would be helpful if they stayed out of politics because it's inherently divisive, because lots of people can't stand Boris Johnson. Millions love him. And that's why I don't think airlines should get involved, because they're there to serve everyone.
Whoever is running Ryanair's Twitter account is very, very unfunny. It's definitely not a comedian, maybe a former failed comedian.
It got a lot of likes and a lot of retweets.
They get themselves into a lot of scraps with people, and actually it comes across as being very unprofessional. And I think ultimately, you know, it's in the free market of ideas, the free market of Twitter and online jokes, I think ultimately go woke, go broke. That's what we've seen with a lot of these companies, with Ben & Jerry's and so many others, who have entered into the fray of divisive political issues. They think they're being funny. They think that, I don't know whether they think that you know, they need to put these causes above actually selling the product or the services that they're supposed to be selling. But I think it actually really puts a lot of people off. And so I know I certainly won't be flying with Ryanair. I'm happy for them to say whatever they want to say on their Twitter. But I think that the way that they conduct themselves, particularly towards people who actually use their services, it's very rude and unpleasant.
The problem is I bloody love Ryanair. I'm a huge fan. I've been travelling with them for years, and I find the staff like really professional.
EasyJet. EasyJet's
Really?
the way
EasyJet
forward.
all the
I
way.
promise I'm not being paid by
I'm very supportive of a lot of unpopular causes, and Ryanair is one of them. But I do think that these corporations, I don't think it's a good look for them to get involved in these divisive issues, Laura. It's obviously, they're trying to be woke, aren't they? They're trying to be on the right side of the political spectrum because that's the current fashion.
Well, they're trying to be morally superior. They think it's safe, as over half the country says they'll vote for Labour at the moment. But I think that kind of moral superiority is a turn-off. I completely agree with you. It's up to them to make jokes. However, there's something else. It's the thin end of a wedge. This moral superiority is being played out in the corporate world in ways which are quite dangerous for us, the consumers.
It's anti-democratic in a way, isn't it?
I think so, because look at PayPal closing down accounts and demonetising people who they don't agree with and not even being clear and transparent about the reasons why. JP Morgan have given Kanye West notice on his accounts. And now, while I don't think it's likely that you're going to have to show your political party membership card when you go through the turnstile with Ryanair, what's the implication? Do they not want Conservatives on the plane? You know, I think that there's... while this is nothing to do with stopping people of certain political persuasions travelling, it just hints at a broader, more concerning trend that people should be somehow punished socially, fiscally, you know, with travel. It's sort of like a social credit feel to these companies that if you're not on the right side, we're not going to serve you. I don't want politics with my ice cream, and I don't really want to know what Ryanair thinks about politics.
And imagine what it must be like to be an employee as well, working within these companies when those companies have taken a political line.
Terrifying.
If you happen to be a Conservative.
And I'm going to drop a truth bomb here. I did a politics degree, and what I learned is that history tells us you need the left and you need the right. You actually require both tribes, and the whole, political dialogue is the dialectic. You know, it's the left wing and then the right wing, and you fight it out and you find something good in the middle. Yeah. A quick word, Tommy Sandu, on the top professor who said it's wrong to call your children naughty. It's as bad as smacking. Are parents being censored?
I've got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. If he heard what I call them in my house, I'd take it away.
Social services, yeah.
Yeah. You've got to call out naughty. I think, again, we're getting caught up in the names, the words, the titles, and not the actual, what underlies it. I love my kids. I'm sure, you love your kids.
Yeah, let's not get carried away.
I'm sure you love my kids as well.
Of course I do.
Right. Meaning, I think you've got to call it out, and I think it's this fear of not being able to say, hey, that's wrong, that's right, that's good. And I know that the professor was focusing on saying that behaviour is naughty rather than you are naughty. And I wouldn't call my kid stupid, for example. I wouldn't say you're stupid, but I say that was a stupid thing to do. What are you doing? Because you just kicked the ball into a
And a bit of tough love, and the clue's in the name, isn't it,
yeah,
Laura Dodsworth? Yeah. Tough and then love. And one of the best words you can use on your child is no. Which
and
not pleasant at the time.
No, you naughty person. No, I'm only joking. The thing is, this professor clearly doesn't have very naughty children, because if your children are really naughty, every now and then, it's a little slip of the tongue, stop being so naughty.
Let me tell you that this is one of the naughtiest panels I've had, and I've loved every minute. Emma Webb, Laura Dodsworth, Tommy Sandu, thank you so much. Come back and see us soon. Thanks for your company and your emails. We'll do it again tomorrow. And tomorrow is a Race for Number 10 special. Some of the biggest names in politics live on the show at 9 o'clock. Set your alarm. See you then. Stick around for headliners. I'm on that next as well. See you tomorrow night.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather mixed as heavy and thundery bands of rain push north right across the country. Let's home in on the detail. So a rather cloudy start to Sunday morning across northern Scotland, with some low cloud and also patchy rain in places. Temperatures starting the day on a mild note as a result. It's a cloudy morning too for Northern Ireland, with some patchy rain or drizzle in places. Any brighter breaks will be reserved for the east coast. A dry start across northern England for those up early too. However, outbreaks of heavy and thundery rain will quickly move in from the south. And turning increasingly wet across North Wales and the Liverpool Bay area as thundery rain moves northwards. Difficult travelling conditions as well expected as the winds start to pick up. Temperatures around 14 degrees Celsius. And thunderstorms to greet the Midlands early on Sunday morning. Heavy downpours leading to some localised flooding across the area first thing in the morning. Temperatures will start on the mild side though, once more at around 14 Celsius. A cloudy start to Sunday morning across much of East Anglia. However, those thunderstorms and heavy downpours will soon move in from the south. Temperatures beginning the day at around 15 Celsius. A very settled morning across southern England too. Heavy showers and thunderstorms once again.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.